Welcome back, guys, to Pete Punch Beef Gaming. Kristin and I are here to do a review of Last Aurora. The previous video we did was actually the unboxing itself of both Last Aurora and Project Athena, as well as the additional tokens and playmats and things of that nature. And our dog, Thor, has decided to join us. He's sneaking in here. And we thought we've played it a couple times now, and we thought we'd do just a quick snapshot of what we think, generally speaking, in terms of this game overall. So maybe let's start with the overall gameplay. What do you think, Kristin?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a good length, so it wasn't too long, wasn't too short. I liked the mechanics of it. You know, it's broken down into phases, which is good for someone like me who needs a little bit of direction as they go through the game. So, you know, overall, I enjoyed, I enjoyed the way that the game was structured.
Yeah, and just for a little bit of background, the setup of the game probably takes 10 minutes at most. It's pretty easy. There's some variable tokens there's 10 of them, I believe it is, and you kind of shuffle them out and you put them face down and flip them over. So that changes up the variability a little bit. You build a deck of encounter cards, which includes kind of a phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase is not the right word. Level 1, 2, and 3 complexity or depth associated with them. Each one of those has some variability. You know, take cards in, or you add cards. You don't actually end up pulling any cards. You add special cards in. There's a set amount depending on the player number. It's not real hard to build. It's very similar to some other mechanics that are out there. You build kind of an objects deck. Again, that's just shuffling up. Pretty simple overall. You put your cars on the starting line. You give everybody their basic, their leader and their co-pilot, and their starting truck as well as their trailer. And away you go. So if you're familiar with it, not reading the rule book, I think maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 to get it set up. It goes pretty quick, especially if it's more than one person or another, which I think is a big plus.
Yeah.
And then, as Kristin referenced, the game's played over 5 phases. I think there's really 2 phases that are very meaty. The first one is the explore phase, where you're sending out people in your crew to investigate sites or get new gear for your caravan, anything along those lines. There's the occasional encounter that does come up, and there's the occasional bad guy that does show up. And there's 5 that are shown at any given time on a 3-player or 4-player game. There might be a little less on a 2-player. I don't know. We played it at 3 and 4 players, right?
We did, and I'm not sure that it changes.
Yeah, it might not.
Yeah.
And as you do one, you kind of slide it down, and essentially you go in one order when you are picking objectives, and everybody picks an encounter card, resolves it. The next player's turn, they do the same thing. And that either exhausts your character or rests your character. And again, this isn't a how to play. It just kind of talks through. And I think one of the things that I picked up right out of the gate, and I don't know if you noticed, but the more characters you have, the more actions you get. And that's a very important thing.
It is. And for endgame scoring, you actually get more points for more characters, which I don't think we realized on the first playthrough until we did the end-game scoring. Even though it says it, it's one of those things you don't really pay attention to throughout the game. Yep. And then we put more focus on it the second playthrough. Yeah,
and so this encounter phase 2, I think, is where the meat of the game is when you get right down to it. This is where you'll spend the most time. Once that's done, you go into a rest phase where you're paying food to move exhausted characters to the ready. If you don't want to pay food, then you move your ready or your tired characters to the active phase, or your rested phase to the active phase, and then you finally move your exhausted down. So that's really the meat and potatoes of food and why you want it. And it also helps you explore more difficult locations with less functional survivors overall. Following that, you drive your car across the wasteland, hoping you can take a shortcut or land on an objective. Kristin, you want to explain how it works? It's at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, the movement, because you're following a track. You'll have a speed associated with your truck, and then potential, additional speed bonuses, either with a a person or an add-on to your truck, and essentially you pay fuel to go that set speed, and then you can pay additional fuel to go an additional one beyond that. And as you work through the truck, through the map, you're going to hit certain either bonuses or penalties along the way. And the idea is just to get moving so that you can get to the Aurora before it hits the end of the track.
Yeah, and it's important to know the game can end if you don't hit the Aurora itself before it departs. And I think essentially it's time bound to about 6 turns, which really makes it nice. It's not this open-ended game, and it kind of you can really drive, no pun intended, towards something when you get down
I think both playthroughs we hit the Aurora on the last turn.
Yeah, second playthrough was at turn 5.
Turn 5. The other one.
The first playthrough is turn 6.
So it's it's possible. We made it both times. It seemed like a stretch both times. But I think they've got the timing of the turns or the length of the turns figured out, because you want to be able to get there, but you want it to be challenging for sure. So.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, if you don't make it to the Aurora, it changes the end game scoring slightly. You don't count up non-radiated survivors. I think you count up non-damaged baggage cars on the end of your truck, something to that effect. That's the one slight difference in that area. Anyway, that's turn 3, racing across the wasteland. Turn 4, or phase 4 rather, is the combat phase. It kind of interesting. No dice at all. They use cards to resolve the randomness of the whole thing. Basically, any bad guys that showed up in the explore stage, they ambush you and do damage based on their card to parts of your baggage train. And then from there, you get a chance to attack back if you spend an ammo. And you can pick one of your guns, and you flip over a card. And depending on the value of your gun, from 1 to 4, it tells you how much damage you do, or if you miss, or if you do damage but your gun's jammed, whatever that variation is. And what is neat is the number of players will change the outcome of how much damage needs to be done, which is kind of cool. And then I think we learned that being in the combat is important.
Yes, because Chris was always in the combat and he won both games.
Yeah.
True story.
So it's not a zero sum. If you participate in the combat and you hit, then you mark the card on one of the different spots as having participated, essentially. And after the combat's over, if you defeated the bad guy, you flip over another card and it tells you who gets the special bonus prize. And that can be anything from weapons to vehicles to, I think it's weapons and vehicles.
It is. It's weapons and vehicles. And I don't think we really, again, understood the value of the loot until the end game scoring. What you find out is that each of those loot pieces has a victory point attached to it.
And it's better equipment.
And it's better equipment. Yeah. So you get to upgrade your truck, upgrade your weapon, and then at the end of the game, you get to count it towards your victory points. Depending
on what it is. Either way, you don't want to neglect them.
Nope.
If you don't hit the jackpot and get the loot associated, you do get some object cards that you can use to help kind of move you forward. This was an area of confusion for us a little bit, I'd say. It's interesting. Some of the cards say discard, some of them don't. The first playthrough, we interpreted that the ones that don't say discard, you could just keep using them.
Yeah.
But then the rule book said that after you use them, you discard them. So I think that there's a little bit of refinement that could happen there. Just be very succinct about, do you discard, do you not discard? And if you guys have feedback or know differently, throw it in the comments.
We actually tried the FAQ a couple times while we were playing and couldn't find any posts about it. So I think we were incorrect the first playthrough, and then the second time we were discarding all the object cards. Because the other thing is, if you don't use an object card, you get to use that
as a victory
point as well. Yep. So it makes sense that you would either use it, discard it, or keep it as a victory point.
Yeah, and then after you attack, assuming you don't beat the guy, then they shoot back at you, and it's they do damage to your caravan. Then the fifth and final stage is kind of the cleanup stage. You move the Aurora one step. If you have more, for a 3 to 4 player game, if you have more than 3 explore cards out. You discard 2 to the leftmost area, slide them all down and deal out 2 more, and then you reset and you go again. It is important to note, and I did skip over it, that moving across the wastelands in reverse order to exploring. So if you're first to explore, you're last to drive.
Yeah.
It's once you kind of get a playthrough, it's not super difficult to play. It's pretty approachable, which I give them credit for. I don't know, any other things I missed?
No, I mean, I think once we made it through one turn, we pretty much understood how each of the turns was going to go, and it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So let's move on to theme. What do you think about the theme overall?
I really like the theme. I thought I would like it. You know, before we started, I like the kind of the ice and winter themed games anyways. But I'll be honest, my favorite part were the trucks and the baggage cars.
This is pretty cool.
I mean, they were just a lot of fun, right? You had rusty trailers, baggage. You know, you get to build your truck throughout the game, and so you're adding pieces to it, and they're all just beat up. And then you get the one, you know, the truck with the tracks, and it was just a lot of fun to build the trucks. So that was probably my favorite part. And then I liked the explorers too, with their little gas masks on, and they were pretty good.
You know, what was interesting to me is it is a lot of fun because you have your truck, and your truck tells you how many trailers you get to have, and you set those cards off behind. And then you get guns and toppers like an armored baggage rack, and you literally put the car right on top. And they've done the art in such a way that you can kind of mix and match all these pieces, and it seems pretty seamless. Like that's the way it should have looked to begin with. Although you can really kind of put whatever you want wherever you want.
Yeah.
It walks this really interesting fine line between gritty survival, especially when you look at the bad guys, and kind of fun, whimsical. It's a very clever art style, so I definitely give credit for that. I think that was a lot of fun. And our 13-year-old played with us both times, Paige, and she
liked it.
She loved it. So that was a really good thing. You know, theme-wise for me, I think the mat was awesome. I think the the Kickstarter bonus tokens, I think all kind of helped cement that this was a post-apocalyptic survival type game to some extent. I think without those, it felt a little less immersive, maybe is what I'd say.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would detract from the gameplay, but some games you really feel like it oozes the theme. This one I felt like definitely represented the theme, but I think it needed some help from the Kickstarter tokens and bits and the maps and things of that nature. I don't know what your thoughts were on that.
I agree. Just thinking through it now as you talk about it, having a gas can as opposed to a pink square cube really gave you more of a feeling of what you what your resource is, what you were using it for, as opposed to just a colored block. So I agree.
Yeah, saying, hey, I need another pink one or I need an orange one.
Yeah, exactly. Which does take away from the theme whenever you're playing a game.
Yeah. If you were to rank the theme on a scale of 1 to 12, where would you stick the landing on this one?
I'm not always a huge, post-apocalyptic kind of fan, so I would definitely go above average because I like the winter theme. I loved the trucks. I like all the bad guys were wolves.
Yeah.
So I'd probably go maybe an 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think an 8's perfect. I don't know that I disagree with it. I think I do like this genre, and in terms of how interwoven to the mechanics, I do feel like it's a little above average. So I would go with 8.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of ease and complexity, I think a lot of people are like, all right, is this a super weighty, meaty game? Is it a lighter game? Where does it fall in that area? And certainly some of this is subjective. But if you were to look at this from anywhere from a scale of really light to very heavy, meaty mechanics-wise, where would you put this?
I put it right down the middle. I didn't feel overwhelmed by any of the mechanics. And I know we play a lot of games, but even, for instance, I don't love movement games because sometimes I just don't know what to do. Well, it was very simple. There's only one way to go unless you have a shortcut, so that every piece of it and the structure of it, I think, just kept it right down the middle as far as complexity.
Yeah. I think I would probably put it on low to moving towards medium because there is some choices that you can make. Do I get the baggage car versus do I get the person or do I get the gun? But there's not a lot. There isn't a whole bunch of analysis paralysis. You're not looking at a game like, I don't know, Eclipse or maybe Side. But it's, I think, a little weightier than, say, Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
Not that Ticket to Ride doesn't have strategy. I'm not trying to say that.
No, but it's definitely.
But if I was teaching somebody who's a non-gamer a game, this is probably not the very beginning intro game, but I think it could be one that you could introduce pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's definitely on the lighter side, which again isn't a bad thing. It's just, sometimes you want a little lighter game where you're not burning your brain out.
Well, and that's what allowed our 13-year-old to play and to play competitively with us, not just kind of be dragging along. So
yeah, let's move to variation and replayability.
Yeah, I think it's very replayable because it will change every time. Like you said, there's going to be different ways to explore, different cards. With that said, the characters, your starting character or your trucks are the same every time. So there's not a lot of variability there. Because the movement is so straight line, there's not a lot of variability there. So I could see that maybe after a half dozen plays, it would really benefit from the additional cards. I think having the expansion really will help because it'll kind of, it gives you extra bad guys, it gives you more exciting trucks, that kind of stuff. But there's not a ton of variability from play to play just because you're always playing with the same base character.
Yeah. I would say as well that keep in mind there's two sides to the board. So we only played side A because that's the only thing that's printed on the map. But you can play side B. You do swap in cards depending on the number of players, although if you're playing 4 players, it's pretty much all the cards. Mm-hmm. I think that also the where the different tokens go on the map changes up a little bit. But the variability, I think this game is going to be very dependent on adding the expansions, whether it's the mutants or the Last Aurora expansion or some of the Kickstarter exclusives. And I don't know how frequent those are going to be or if it's available or not. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think it will be dependent. So it's not the most variable game that we've ever played, but I do think it's got some legs. It's also not static either, for what it's worth. Okay, let's move on to, what do you think in terms of comparable games? Does this remind you of anything?
Probably that I can't think off the top of my head. I'm sure you've got something that...
Yeah, I would say in some of the movement stuff, it feels like, some of the rail games, moving along the tracks, although there is only one way to go. It does feel like it's got some Dead of Winter themes to it, although there's no trader mechanic, and there is no cooperativeness. It's kind of in the middle in terms of the survival versus some of these others. So I don't know. I don't know, maybe even, and I think if you squinted real hard, it might be like Cows in the sense that you're following a track. Although in Cows, Great Western Trails, you loop around several times. This one's just kind of A to B in that case.
Yeah, I actually think that one's a lot more complex.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But it does have kind of that. The linear movement is very important in where you stop. I see that happening in that space. But, I don't know. It's interesting when you look at something like Descent relative to Gloomhaven, they're different ways of getting to the same thing, but they're both dungeon crawlers, for example. I don't know that there's one exactly like this in our collection, but I do think there's something there. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go ahead and do, in terms of value and overall, enjoyability. So again, I'll remind you that it was about $50 for the base game. For all in, include the neoprene mat, all the expansions, all their bonus tokens, all that good stuff. It cost me just shy of $100. On a scale of 1 to 12, 6 being, it's fine. 1 being, hey, you threw your money away, and 12 being, it'd been awesome at twice the cost. Mm-hmm. Where do you put it, and would you buy it again? Would you, and how are you looking forward to playing it more often?
I'll probably put it slightly above average, probably at a 7. I would definitely play it again. Absolutely. Do I think it's worth $90? I think we've got a lot of cheaper games that I would rather play a lot of times. And part of it is I don't know that I would want to play it without all the extras. And so that ups the price of, what to me is a baseline. It would be fine without them, but now that you've played with, I love the mats. I mean, I just do. And I know we talked about that during the unboxing, and I love the upgraded pieces. And to your point, it really enhanced the theme a bit. So, maybe even if you don't count the expansion, you say that's $70 worth of game. It's good for a $70 game, but it's not the best one I've ever played.
Yeah, I think I'm not disappointed I backed the Kickstarter. I do, at the $100 price point, there's a lot of competition in this space. Will I keep this in my collection for a while? Yeah, I think I will. I definitely want to play it again, but I want to play with the expansions. I'm already feeling like I'm ready. I'll tell you, as a general rule of thumb, we don't add expansions until we've played it 5 times. I do feel like I'm already ready to add some expansions. I think this is a game I would break out to newer players, or for newer players to the tabletop board game community, because I think it is approachable with some great theme. But if I was looking for a really crunchy, weighty game, this isn't it. That is, again, doesn't make it bad. But I do feel like there is, this is just on the lighter side of things, and that's just kind of where it is, and that's okay. Overall, though, I am happy I backed it. I do think they did a nice job with this game. And I feel like if you're looking for a post-apocalyptic game that's approachable by many and has both kind of the little bit of edginess, but also a little bit whimsical, I think this is pretty good.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it, but giving the time to play, right? So sometimes you don't want to sit down for 4 hours. So the fact that you can go through this in about, once you played it once, probably an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'd say about 90 minutes.
It's nice because you don't always have the time to sit down for hours on end. And that does make it a good choice and something worth keeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I think that's our thoughts. Nicely done, Pendragon Games. We certainly enjoyed this. And Aries has her name on it as well. And we look forward to the next video with you all. But if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and like the video. It certainly helps the channel. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, take care.
See ya.